Boris Johnson has staked all of his political capital on this notion that we are leaving on October the 31st, come hell or high water. With every fiber of my being, I am going to make that a reality. Boris Johnson had Theresa May's parliament. So regardless of what Boris Johnson wanted to make a reality, and despite the force of will that is marshaled by Boris Johnson in this particular case, there are certain real hard realities that one has to deal with, and that is Parliament. Despite not being able to discharge anything, what it does know is that it doesn't want a no-deal Brexit. This didn't all that much matter to Johnson, because what Johnson ultimately wanted was an election. His thought was, I am not going to get this parliament to do what I want one way or the other. However, I will get the parliament that I want if I can win an election. And considering how well Nigel Farage did from the standpoint of the Brexit Party, and considering how well the Tories were doing, from a polling standpoint, Johnson understood that an election may be what he needed to get the parliament that he wanted to deliver on his promise of leaving by October 31st, come hell or high water. Problem: Parliament has blocked the no-deal Brexit route. And Parliament has told you to go to Brussels in order to get a deal by law. By law. By law, Parliament has just told you to do something that you said under no circumstances you will never do. So what is Boris Johnson going to do? Boris Johnson is in a fix. And ultimately, for all of his best laid plans, which I've gave him credit for as being somewhat brilliant, thing of foreplanning, the problem is that Labour is not on board for an election. And while I do believe that there will be an election, between then and now, Boris Johnson is stuck in an impossible position where he has said, I don't care what Parliament says. I will not go to Brussels. Meaning, Boris Johnson, up to this point, sounds like he is going to break the law. And Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister of the UK, new Prime Minister, is risking jail. Gotta love British politics. Welcome to the Soapbox. My name is Jamarl Thomas. This is the Progressive Soapbox. Guys, if you like this content and you find yourself coming back here often, please consider liking, sharing, and of course, subscribing. Also, if you really dig it, please consider supporting through PayPal or Patreon. This content is brought to you by you, and you allow this content to essentially keep ticking along. I'm not going to keep this video long because in 10 minutes, I'm going to be on fault lines. But I want to get this video out because I'm keeping track of what is taking place in British politics, and things are accelerating in regards to the pace, because on October the 31st, they are supposed to leave, which means Parliament need to figure out something that is going to do between then and now. And at this point, the Prime Minister is being compelled to do something that he said under no circumstances will he do. I will never go to Brussels. I will never get an extension. We will leave on October the 31st, period. And Parliament says, yeah, I understand the campaign pledge and all, but by law, you are under law, just like anybody else. And you will go, bended knee, hat in hand, and get that extension. I don't care what you promised your constituents. We have a standoff. Boris Johnson has said, I will defy the law over Brexit extension. I am not going to go to Brussels. I don't care what law you pass. In this case, I'm going to defy the law. That's extraordinary. Now, my point was always Boris Johnson really only have very few choices. Either he gets someone to call a no confidence vote himself, he defies the law and risks jail, and definitely risks a contempt vote. And at that point, a no confidence vote will be called, in which case there will be an election. And any way you look at it, Parliament is in an untenable position. There has to be some kind of election in order for the public to make a choice one way or the other. Right now, despite all of Boris Johnson's failures and despite the fix that Boris Johnson is in from the standpoint of polling, Boris Johnson is ahead in spades. In one poll, he was up 14 points. And right here, despite suffering, Boris Johnson has gotten a boost Two polls published on Saturday evening give the Conservative a commanding lead over Labour, suggesting Mr. Johnson's hardline stance over Brexit is cutting into votes. And by the way, the Brexit Party, if Boris Johnson makes a deal with the Brexit Party, in which case they corner the market, they will win in a landslide. Mark my words for this. Part of this has to do with Jeremy Corbyn's essentially looking like a Remainer and looking like he's not going to support and back up the referendum. Meaning, Labour doesn't look like it's supporting Brexit. They come across as a Remainer party. Johnson is clear on what he wants. Despite being clear on what he wants and despite what is said in the polls, right now Boris Johnson has a problem. Parliament is telling me to do something I said I would never do. One of his surrogates, Chancellor Javid, is stomping for Johnson. Listen to the nonsensical words that he's saying that make zero sense when he's asked a very basic question. Is the Prime Minister going to comply with the law if the law tells him to go to Brussels, hat in hand or bended knee to get an extension? Listen to what he says.
He's looking ahead is an election. You've said that you hate the Benn Bill. I can understand we dislike the Benn Bill. Can I ask you, is it at all credible for the Prime Minister not to obey the rule of law? If the Benn Bill becomes law, then surely the Prime Minister has to do what it says. No ifs, no buts.
Well, this government, of course, it will obey the law. The Prime Minister's been very clear about that. He was asked about that in Parliament last week, and he was very clear. So we will obey all laws.
If the law says the Prime Minister must ask for an extension beyond October the 31st to Brussels, the Prime Minister will do that because that's what the law says.
Well, I'll tell you what the Prime Minister is going to do, because this is very important for your listeners to hear, because it's been the big issue this week.
When somebody doesn't answer a yes or no question with a yes or no, be skeptical of their answer. Will the Prime Minister obey the law, yes or no? And there are a lot of words that are coming out. Yes is not one of them. The problem is he can't say yes. If he says yes, then the Brexiteers and people who are Tory Brexiteers are going to be very cross at him because he said he will never do that. From a political standpoint, you have a problem. You can never admit to obeying the law at this point, because at this point, if you admit to obeying the law, you essentially repudiate what you said you were going to do on the campaign trail. However, if you break the law, you could be put in jail. So what do? Shuck and jive. Shuck and jive. Listen to this word salad that makes zero logical sense. Either the Prime Minister is going to obey the law or not. What is Javid talking about?
We are going to continue to work towards exit on October the 31st. We will leave on October 31st. We will work for a deal. We will keep putting all our effort in that and preparations for no deal, just in case that's the only way we can leave. The Prime Minister will go to the October Council meeting on October the 17th and 18th, and he will try to strike a deal. He absolutely will not ask for an extension in that meeting.
But that's the problem. If the law says that he must ask for an extension, what are his options?
Well, the law talks about October the 19th in case there is no deal agreed in that council meeting. Should we get to that position, we will look at our options. Of course, we'll obey the law, but we will look at our options.
October the 19th,
and we will not.
After that council, the Prime Minister would ask for an extension because that is the law of this country.
We will not change our policy. Our policy
How
is
does
clear.
this work? It's completely baffling.
Well, we have to wait and see.
If the law says one thing, and you're saying the government's going to obey the law, but we're not going to do that one thing, it's very hard to see how you get out of that.
The government will not change its policy, and we will be consistent with obeying the law, but also sticking to our policy, and you'll have to wait and see how that happens. There's a lot of days between now and October the 19th, and we will be working full on until October 31st, actually, to either leave with a deal or to leave with no deal.
So the government's position is that we will obey the law, but we won't do what the law tells us to do.
Those are your words. Those are not my words. No, absolutely not. We are clear.
Well, explain what's wrong about that. Explain what's wrong about what I've just said.
Well, first of all, the Prime Minister will go to the council meeting on the 17th and 18th. He'll be trying to strike a deal. He absolutely will not be asking for an extension in that meeting. Should we, the bill talks about the 19th being an important date,
yes,
and at that point we will consider our options, but our policy is clear, it is unchanged. We will be leaving on October the 31st.
So what that means is at that council, if you don't get a deal and the 19th comes round, as dates tend to do, you at that point will obey the law or not?
We will obey all laws, because all governments should obey laws, absolutely. But you'll have to wait and see what happens then. But we are clear. We must, and let me just say...
This is an outright nonsensical answer. This answer makes zero sense. Think about what he's saying. Will you obey the law? If the law is telling you to go and get an extension because no deal is off the table by law, no deal is off the table, and you are being commanded by your government, by your parliament, to go and sign on the line to ask for an extension. Now, we don't even know if the EU will give Britain an extension. Understand what I mean? Boris Johnson can go and ask for an extension, and one of the countries could say, yeah, I'm done with this. No. In which case, Britain will tumble out. They're making assumptions that Britain will even get the extension. But he's saying we will obey all laws. However, we are not changing our policy, and nor will we ask for an extension. So, well, wait a minute. If the law tells you to ask for an extension, how can you say that you're going to obey all laws if you're not going to do just the thing that the law is telling you to do? You'd have to wait and see. What do you mean you have to wait and see? That's a yes or no. Are you going to obey the law or not? We will obey all laws. All governments should obey all laws. Yeah, but if the law is telling you to ask for an extension, we're still going to obey the law, but we're just not going to ask for the extension. Yeah, but the law is to ask for an extension. I know, but we're going to obey all laws, but we're not going to ask for an extension. This is an outright nonsensical answer. And, whether they're going to fight this in courts or not, it has already been said that the negotiations are a sham. And I would put to you that the reason negotiations are a sham is because the negotiation really is, we will leave. And you don't want us to leave without a deal. And so, the problem here is Boris Johnson can't deliver on that threat. The threat to leave without a deal, which will adversely affect Europe, even though it would also adversely affect Britain. It's unclear how much it would adversely affect Britain, but adversely affect Britain. They don't want an uncontrolled exit from the European Union. And if Boris Johnson has the ability to discharge that particular threat, then Europe may negotiate with him. The problem is he has no capacity to discharge that threat. And whatever these guys are planning, at the end of the day, it is possible that Boris Johnson, if he breaks the law in this case, could face prison time. British politics is fascinating. Like, share, subscribe. Thanks all. I'm going to be on fault lines in like 5 minutes. I'll see you then. Bye-bye. Or I'll see you after the show. It's only going to be like 20 minutes.